Gacha games, Genshin Impact, Uma Musume,
승리의 여신 니케.
Honkai Star Rail. All these gacha games have their own appeal. But there's an issue that a majority of these games all have in common, and that's what I like to call forgotten characters. Now, I'm not talking about it in the sense of gameplay, like, oh, how these characters should be buffed, or how power creep has rendered some characters obsolete. No, I mean in terms of the narrative. In the broad scope of things, most of these games will introduce a character. The story will focus on them for a bit, but then afterwards, we'll only see them for a handful of times if we're lucky. Now, what's wrong with that, you may ask? Well, actually, technically nothing really. It's normal for that to happen in other forms of media, like anime. And while in gacha games, you play it for the gacha. A chance to get your favorite character, sure. When they get featured, they get all their attention. They get to stand out above the rest. But the moment the story is over, it's actually pretty rare that you'll see them again. Now, before you get up in arms about, oh, DJ, in Genshin Impact, we see the Fatui and the Archons. Well, those are niche cases. What about these other characters? Once your playable cast gets big enough, you start to see the issue of giving everyone their time shine in the limelight and then leaving them off to the side for the next person. Story-wise for these games, makes total sense. And I'm pretty much going to be using Genshin as the example for like all of these. Mainly because it's the one I've been with the longest, but also because I assume a majority of people are somewhat aware of it, either playing the game or at least seen it. These are the Knights of Favonius. They're from Mondstadt, the very first nation that we encounter in Genshin. But the thing is, after we leave, we really don't get to know about them until we basically loop around 5 more nations. The only time we really see these guys is through events, and sometimes the events aren't even about them. It also doesn't help that you can't play past events, even if they drop massive lore bombs like the sky is false. Now, story-wise, I'm not saying the travelers should gain more and more party members like a Pokemon trainer, but you can't tell me it's pretty jarring to play a game, fall in love with one of the characters, and then realize, oh, they are out of the picture now. And every time they're shown, it's basically for an event until they go back into their hidey hole. Story-wise, once again, technically nothing wrong with that. But when you want to be invested, some of these characters by far are more appealing when you actually see them in the story more. Another example is Withering Waves. We haven't seen anyone from the previous region in a long time. Not until this final battle where you see everyone coming together. Seeing your favorite character for a few moments and then watching them go back into the toy box where they came from can be annoying, especially with how often they can be used for marketing. I swear to God, the moment I upload this video, she is going to appear on the banners. I already had a whole thing ready to talk about Genshin Impact adding a skip button until my friend told me about how Genshin was gonna add a skip button. Now I gotta throw that entire video away. But back at the topic at hand, that's just how the narrative works. It would be impossible to have a game where everyone in the pullable cast is actively participating in the story, to have every single pullable character have stakes at the conflict at hand. And for those who know about Project Moon, you know what I'm about to talk about.
Limbus Company!
I'm just gonna play this clip. And Limbus Company is a gacha game created by Project Moon. We are you or Dante, and these guys are known as the Sinners. And in terms of your cast for gacha, that's all you have. You only have 12. But DJ, how can you have a gacha game with these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 people? Well, in Limbus, they have what they call mirror worlds, basically parallel worlds. And you, as Dante, can basically transform the Sinners into other versions of themselves. And the end result is that we get a ton of versions of characters we know. Take Kanto's 5 main antagonists, Captain Ahab, and Ishmael eventually gets an idea of her, that being Captain Ishmael. And if you're wondering how this is different from any other gacha game, the keyword is pullable characters. Since the cast stays at these 12, all the gacha comes from getting the Mirrorwood versions of them. And a lot of times it helps us understand the characters more. Things like getting better insight of the character or how they would interact in a different situation. For example, in Kanto 3, we deal with N-Corp and their fanatics, seeing how they worship the human body and see prosthetics as a sin, and they're one of the factions that we actually do get IDs out of. The N-Corp versions of the Sinners are an interesting bunch because we see how the N-Corp ideology affects them. Rodion seeing it as a way to become special, thinking she's been chosen, Dawn having her views of justice being twisted, and Sinclair being the chick that was forced to hatch too early and unable to handle it. You may argue that we aren't actually getting these characters. They're just Mirrorwood versions after all, but that's the thing. They're Mirrorwood versions. The events in the mirror world mirror their own, so any event that happens in NAD can give us some more insight into the world as a whole. For this example, the Muscle. In terms of personality, him and Lee Hang are polar opposites, but his upside story gives us a lot more info into events of how the thumb got involved into the story in the first place. They add to the storytelling, giving us more information as a little treat. And for those still confused, allow me to explain it like this. A story's narrative can only hold so many characters in one setting. chapter by chapter, characters will come and go, and in gacha terms, this means your favorite character in the story will have a focus, but once they're moved on to the next one, another character will take their place, and then another one after that. The previous ones either being actually left behind or having a rare cameo appearance. And in Limbus, this is similar, with characters coming and going, but the main difference is the game mechanic of pulling the characters themselves. They only offer the trope you see, and it builds a connection between you, the player, and its character. And I'm not gonna lie, for the first 2 cantos I really only cared about Dawn, while Honglu was slowly growing on me. And as the cantos read on, I found myself caring about each and every sinner more and more. By the time I hit canto 7, I found myself attached to every sinner in some way, whether it's because of a certain ID they have, how they grew because of their canto, or even because how they grew on me over time despite the fact that their canto already ended. I do enjoy these other games, but getting the time to know these characters, seeing them on the banner, and knowing the character isn't going to get much focus on in the future, it's kind of disappointing. The best example of this is Withering Waves. We haven't seen Yinlin in ages, honestly. Limbus is the best of both worlds, where the character itself, or at least a piece of them, is still with us, with it making sense story-wise. A clear example of this is playable enemies and bosses. We're able to get them without the lore getting messy, or having a satisfying reason of why they aren't as strong, the main Limbus lore being, the sinners can't bring out the full power of an ID due to their current strength. That's why we got Middle Heathcliff when we did. The sinners finally reached a level that allows them to use their power. For example, Genshin, because once again, easiest example. You can have a team of Harbingers, and I guess for those unaware, the Harbingers are the main villain group. You can make a team of them, use them throughout the story, and even have them fight their own subordinates. Lore-wise, it definitely doesn't make sense. Now, do I personally care? Not really, but it's just something I wanted to point out because when we play these games, there's always a suspension of disbelief, where we can let things slide knowing the world is different from our own, but that suspension of disbelief can only go so far. That's why I feel like Limbus Company is the exception towards normal gacha games. The sinners get to grow more over time and not just in a single arc. Uptight stories either provide us with key information like how they work, background information on the story, or gives us better insight on the character. And if you've gotten this far, thanks for watching, hit the like and sub, have a nice day, bye bye!